Good morning, students. Welcome to biology class. Due to lockdown, we have been conducting online classes, and in the previous session we have completed your chapter fundamental unit of life, a cell. So today we will be dealing the next chapter in biology, that is tissues. So before we go into the details of this chapter, we just like to recollect the previous chapter, whatever we have studied in the previous chapter. In our previous chapter, fundamental unit of life, we studied about cell. Cell is the basic unit of life which makes all the living organisms. So when we studied about cells, there are two types of organisms, unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. As you all know, unicellular organism consists of only one cell. So entire body consists of only one cell. That single cell performs all the body functions like intake of food, digestion of food, excretion of waste material. All these activities which are required for the life are performed by single cell in unicellular organisms. When it comes to multicellular organisms, multicellular means, as you all know, many cells. An organism is made up of many cells, multiple cells. How these cells perform different functions. So in order to perform different life functions, these cells get together in groups of similar cells to perform specific functions. Such cells, a group of similar cells which perform a specific function, are called tissues. So today we will be studying about tissues in plants, and in our upcoming classes we will be also studying about tissues in animals. So first let us try to understand what is a tissue. A tissue is a group of cells, a group of similar cells which performs a specific function. So all the cells in this group will be similar in structure and their function also is similar. They are called as tissues. So tissues in plants perform various functions needed for the survival of plant, and tissues in animals perform various functions which are necessary for the life of an animal. So when it comes to plant tissues, today we will be specifically studying about plant tissues. We will try to understand first how plant tissues are classified. Basically, plant tissues are classified into two types. First one, meristematic tissue. The second type, permanent tissue. There are two types of plant cells, meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. Today in this session we will be discussing in detail about meristematic tissue. What are the different types of meristematic tissue and what are their specific functions we will be discussing, and maybe in the next session we will be discussing about permanent tissue. What are the different types of permanent tissues and what is their function, we will be studying about that. So when it comes to meristematic tissue is basically a tissue in plants which helps in the growth of the plants. The plant grows, as we all know, a small sapling if you plant, after a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months, you can see that the plant is growing both in terms of height as well as in terms of more branches and leaves. How does it grow? The plants grow because of meristematic tissue. So meristematic tissue is basically the tissue in plants which helps in the growth of the plants. This meristematic tissue is again classified in three types based on its location. Location in the sense where the tissue is located in the plant. Based on that, meristematic tissue is further divided into 3 types. So what are those 3 types? Let us see. Number 1, apical meristematic tissue. Apical meristematic tissue. Number 2, lateral meristematic tissue. And number 3, intercalary meristematic tissue. So the 3 different types of meristematic tissue in plants is apical meristematic tissue, lateral meristematic tissue, and intercalary meristematic tissue. How it is divided into 3 different types? Based on its location, where the tissue is located in the plant. Based on that, meristematic tissue is of 3 types. Basically, meristematic tissue is the tissue which helps the plant in growth. This tissue is very active in growing plants. When the growth becomes slowed down or growth becomes complete, this meristematic tissue will get converted into permanent tissue, which stays in the plant throughout its life. Since the meristematic tissue is involved in the growth, it is involved in active division. Cells in this tissue divide actively to multiply in number. That helps the plant to grow. Now let us see what are the 3 different types of meristematic tissue. First, let us talk about apical meristematic tissue. Apical meristematic tissue is located in the tips of stem as well as the root. Tip, as you know, I'd like to show you a small diagram here. This is tip of stem and this is tip of root. As you all know, the part of plant which is above the ground is called stem, and the part of plant which is underground is root. So tips of both stem and root contain apical meristematic tissue. It's present in the tip, the top part of the stem. Also it's present in the top part of the root. And its function is to help the plant in vertical growth. Vertical growth means plant becomes taller. Plant's height increases because of apical meristematic tissue. Basically, this apical meristematic tissue is present in the tips of both stem as well as root. And by dividing several times, the number of cells in the apical meristematic tissue increase, and that increase helps the plant in growth. Growth in height, plant becomes taller. Because of its location, it is called as apex. Apex means in the top. Apical meristematic tissue located in the tips of both stem and root and helps in the vertical growth of the plant, which ultimately results in the growth in height of the plant. The second type, the first type we have covered. Second type of meristematic tissue is lateral meristematic tissue. Lateral means sides. This meristematic tissue is present in the sides of the parts of the plant, particularly in the stem and also in the branches. This helps in the growth in circumference of the plant. The circumference. If you see a diagram here, a small picture I will draw here. A tender plant may be of this size. Over a period of time, a couple of months, its circumference increases like this. Plant is growing like this. Lateral sides, it is increasing in size. So this lateral growth is called as growth in girth. Girth, G-I-R-T-H, girth. Growth in girth is because of which tissue? Lateral meristematic tissue. This lateral meristematic tissue helps in the growth in girth of the plant or increases the circumference of the plant stem or branches, and it is also called as cambium. Cambium. Lateral meristematic tissue is also called as cambium. So, second type of meristematic tissue is called lateral meristematic tissue. It is present in the lateral sides of the parts of the plant, particularly in the stem as well as in the branches, and it helps in the growth in the circumference of the stem or growth in girth of the plant, and it is also called as cambium. Then third type of meristematic tissue, intercalary meristematic tissue. Inter means in between, intercalary meristematic tissue. This meristematic tissue is present at the base of the leaves, particularly in the nodes. Node, you all might be knowing, you have studied in your lower classes, 6th class and 7th classes. A node is a place from where a leaf comes out of the stem. So, this lateral meristematic tissue is present at the base of the leaves, that is in the nodes, and it helps in the growth in the internodes. What is internode? Internode is a place between two nodes. For example, it's a stem. If stem is like this is node, one node. This is another node. And the distance between two nodes is called internode. As I said, at nodes usually leaves are present. So at the base of the leaves, intercalary meristematic tissue is present, and this intercalary meristematic tissue helps in the growth in the internodal distance. Particularly if you see grass plants or monocotyledons like bamboo, sugarcane, you can see the nodes clearly, and these nodes, in between the nodes, the distance is called internodal distance. This internodal distance growth happens because of intercalary meristematic tissue. The third type of meristematic tissue is intercalary meristematic tissue. It is present in the nodes, particularly the base of the leaves, and it helps in the growth of internodal distance. And this is the reason, because of internodal distance growth, the plants becomes taller. That means it is also helping in the growth of the plants. Basically, all the three types of meristematic tissue basically help in the growth of the plant. Apical meristematic tissue helps in the growth in height. Lateral meristematic tissue helps in the growth in girth. Intercalary meristematic tissue helps in growth in internodal distance. And another specialty of this intercalary meristematic tissue is, suppose if a grass plant is cut because of any reason, usually animals graze in the grass fields. That means they are cutting the grass plants, they are eating a part of it. The remaining part of it will grow because of intercalary meristematic tissue, which is present in the nodes, and that helps in the growth of internodal distance. So these are the three different types of meristematic tissue. Now I'd like to show you, after erasing this, I'd like to show you a chart which will give you a clear idea about tissues, their classification, and more so particularly the meristematic tissue and its classification. I'd like to show you that. See children, here you can see the chart which shows the classification of tissues, plant tissues. Today our topic is plant tissues, and in that again more so particularly meristematic tissue. Now let us see how plant tissues are classified. Plant tissues are classified into two types, meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. Here it is written in brackets, cells are capable of division. I told you already. Only because of the division, cells become more in number, cells multiply, and that helps in the growth of the plant. So basically meristematic tissue helps in the growth of the plant. Then second one is permanent tissue. This tissue stays in the plant throughout its life. So we will study more details of permanent tissue in our next class. Today we will study only about meristematic tissue. So I will show you how meristematic tissue is classified. Here you see meristematic tissue is classified into 3 types. It is given clearly here: apical meristematic tissue, lateral meristematic tissue, and intercalary meristematic tissue. Apical meristematic tissue is present at the growing tips of the stem and roots, edges of the stem and root, and its main function is to increase the length of the stem and roots, that is height. Plant becomes taller. And here lateral meristematic tissue is present at the lateral sides of the stem and roots, and it is also called as cambium. What is its function? Its main function is to increase the thickness of the stem. Stem thickness means circumference of the stem. That is also called as growth in girth, G-I-R-T-H, girth. The third type of meristematic tissue is given here, intercalary meristematic tissue. It is present at the base of the leaves and it helps in the increase of internodal division. Here a sugarcane plant is shown here. Intercalary meristematic tissue is present at the nodes or base of the leaves. Apical meristematic tissue is present at the tips, and lateral meristematic tissue is present at the sides of the plants. So children, today's topic is particularly tissues. In that tissues, again plant tissues. In plant tissues, we have specifically studied about meristematic tissue, which helps in the growth of the plant. I suggest you please go through your textbook thoroughly, read line by line, try to understand all the terminology, and after this I will give you an assignment. Maybe we will meet in the next class. When we meet in the next class, we will interact. One-to-one we will interact. I will be asking questions on this topic. So be thorough. Watch my video carefully and then go through your textbook. Try to understand all the terminology and then be prepared to write the assignment. Thank you.